Hello, everyone, and welcome to the future of document processing and information management. I'm Bart Peluso, Vice President of Marketing for Knowledge Lake, and we have a great webinar for you today. I want to welcome you all, and first, share some housekeeping. This webinar will be recorded and available to you, and you can add questions to the chat for our Q&A session at the end of the webinar. You know, every day I get more excited about the evolution of information management. I recently read an article by McKinsey that is very relevant to our industry. It was all about the impact of AI on information management. AI you can really use quickly and efficiently. It also talked about what is top of mind for the C-suite moving forward into 2024. First is that the rate of change is accelerating and the C-suite needs to keep up with it. Businesses need to progress quickly. And overall, the ROI or true benefits of AI are understated. Most importantly, data is the key to improving business, as AI is only as good as the data it can access. It's exciting times in information management. And today we have Tori Miller Liu, Chief Executive Officer of the Association for Intelligent Information Management, or AIIM, and Jason Verian, Vice President of Product for Knowledge Lake. We'll have some poll questions along the way, and again, we'll save time for Q&A. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Tori.
Thank you, Bart. So let me tell you for a minute, let me tell you for a minute about what the Association for Intelligent Information Management is, and then I'm happy to share some trends and technology that we're seeing over the next year or so. So AIIM is the world's leading association dedicated to the information management industry. Since 1944, AIIM has helped organizations use their information to solve business problems, create new value, and strengthen organizational performance. We have over 66,000 community members, and we serve a vibrant community of information management leaders. We provide forward-focused, technology-enabled solutions, research, training, and professional certification to empower information leaders to help their organizations succeed. If you'd like to learn more about the future of information management and join our thriving community, please consider joining AIIM as a member. You can visit aim.org/pro to learn more. Sorry. Am I advancing the slides? I think I am. All right. If you'd like to learn more about our certification, I am really proud to announce that we just launched a new version of the Certified Information Professional, or CIP. The new version features all new questions and an updated body of knowledge, which happens to include new sections on AI, large language models, IDP, and RPA. So I highly recommend the CIP if you want to demonstrate to your organization your thought leadership and expertise in IM. So today I wanted to talk to you about the future of IM, and I want to share some of the trends that we're seeing in our research and also hearing from our members. These evolving and emerging trends, I think, are fueled by the democratization of technology, which is leading to a few important trends, which I'm going to dive into. These include expanding tech stacks, a pressing need for automation, and the emergence of intuitive AI, which is driven by generative AI. So let me see. Oh, sorry. So Accenture and other analysts have described the democratization of tech as an environment where software is becoming more accessible to workers outside of IT. And workforces are becoming much more technically literate. In this new democracy, what we're seeing is more low-code and no-code applications, more affordable software, and also much more user-friendly interfaces. The sort of Negative side to that is we're also seeing a really increased pressing need for higher information security and data privacy because you have all of these systems and you have expanding tech stacks as a result. So let's bring up our first poll question. That's a good segue since we just mentioned expanding tech stacks and systems. This first question is, does your organization buy point solutions to solve a specific need, or do you purchase multifunctional platforms? And I think Pam's going to bring up the poll so everyone can respond to that.
Yes, and if you, I think if you click on the poll icon to the right, you should see the poll is live currently. Do you see it?
I don't. Wait, yes, I do. There we go.
Yeah, and for the audience, if you want to go ahead and participate and respond to the poll, that would be great.
Lots of multifunctional platforms. So 100% multifunctional platforms. Very good. That's fascinating. 100% multifunctional. All right. So let's talk about the first trend around the growing information management tech stack. In our State of the Industry report for 2023, we asked respondents how many different IAM systems or repositories does your organization currently use? And we found that organizations that use at least 7, but 7 to 10 systems went up from 3.6 in 2013 to 6.2 in 2018, and now it's at 14.42% in 2023. So that's about 100% growth every 5 years in the number of systems that folks are using. So, disclaimer, having a bunch of systems isn't necessarily a bad thing. I mean, after all, with cloud computing and software as a system, software as a service products, the capital expenses have dramatically reduced, right? It's pretty affordable to have this many systems doing it. We have point solutions that are also best of breed, and they're targeting very specific IAM problems. So not necessarily a bad thing, except when you talk about interoperability. So the other piece of data that we pulled from our 2023 report is how many applications are you using to store and access content, and how do they integrate with other IAM systems? And what we found is across the board, key systems like your CRM, project management tools, and collaboration software were not integrated to IAM systems like your document management system, your enterprise content management system, or a record management system. And you can see in blue here, 30% or less of respondents said that there was any kind of interoperability. In green, it's showing that, or excuse me, yeah, 30% shows in blue that there was some interoperability, and green shows that there's no interoperability. We call the resulting effect the silo effect, which you've probably heard of some other tech analysts talk about. But when we see information tools that are not connecting well to other line of business applications within the enterprise, the result really is information chaos, right? So you have an issue where you have a greater governance issue. Instead of all these systems actually solving it, there's more governance problems. And on a day-to-day basis, you have users that can't really access the information that they need easily. So they're still having to work harder to just get their jobs done. Our recommendations usually when you talk about interoperability issues is, one, you really need to carefully evaluate any new systems that are coming online. And I do believe that that should be done in partnership with your information management leaders, your IT leaders, and line of business leaders. I think you also need to ensure that any new systems that come online and are deployed are integrated into that wider information system. So in my previous life as a CIO, I would constantly preach the idea of we're API first, we're privacy first, we're API first. Any new application that comes on has to have an available API so that we can easily integrate. So those are the types of standards that I think we need to start defining and putting into our governance policies. So users, when they are embracing the democratization of tech, know what kind of systems to look for. So the second trend that we're seeing is this high demand for automation. With more systems and tech stacks and really high expectations from customers, organizations are pushing for seamless, automated workflows. And they also want to improve existing automations that were already in place. We asked in our survey, how would you rate the level of automation of core business processes within your organization? And we found that organizations are still making progress with regards to the automation of core business processes, but they're not entirely happy with the results. So you can see here in blue, they were marking automated processes as above average in their organization, and the green is below average. You can see in areas like supply chain and records management and legal contract management, respondents and their organizations really felt that they were actually kind of above average when it came to process automation. But a third of the respondents felt that they have below average automation in areas like the digital mailroom and employee onboarding and file management. So obviously there's definitely still some work to be done when it comes to the automation ecosystem. It's also worth noting, and this hasn't shown up in our data, but I have heard it in a lot of conversations with members throughout the year. There are probably misconceptions about the affordability of automation. With democratization of tech, we are seeing the cost of automation really significantly decrease over probably the last 5 years. So it's worth noting that organizations shouldn't be discouraged by charts like this. I think it actually paints a picture of where there's opportunities to add automation at a pretty affordable rate when you look at how many staff hours you're spending on some of these processes. So the third trend here is the emergence of intuitive AI. And I think you probably all would agree with me that this is definitely a trend that's especially important to note when you're talking about the future of information management. We're seeing a really rapid move to incorporate intuitive AI into existing information systems. And just to pause for a moment and define, when we say intuitive AI, when Knowledge Lake or other vendors say it, they're using it as a way to describe artificial intelligence that's not focused on technology. So intuitive AI is an approachable model that doesn't require training, but it's powered by generative AI. What I think is kind of interesting about the integration of intuitive AI into existing systems is it's not a binary choice. So as a CIO, I had leadership say, we want to invest in AI. Let's invest in AI. And my argument back was, this is not a yes-no decision. You are going to have solution providers that will integrate intuitive AI into existing systems that we already operate. So it's not like we need to say, let's do a totally brand new, net new investment in AI. It's already here. And many of you have probably already seen this. If you're using Salesforce, HubSpot, Office 365, we are seeing that integration of intuitive and generative AI into the existing tech stack. In addition to the integration with existing software, organizations are increasingly finding real-world applications for AI. So this chart is a little dated. It's actually from 2019 and some research we did that year. And in it, we identified a bunch of use cases for AI, real-world applications for AI. And these were organizations saying, we are using AI for internal reviews and approvals, for sales proposals and contracts. A lot of these probably seem pretty familiar as use cases, right? We're now hearing, though, that a lot of these processes are being further optimized with intuitive AI, which is helping now with search, categorization, and more. So I kind of wanted to share this chart because I think it demonstrates what are probably low-hanging fruit for the application of intuitive AI. Since we were already using narrow AI to attack these problems, you can much more easily put intuitive AI on top of it because you have an existing, reliable, accurate data set to build on. So I think that brings us to our second poll question. Yes. All right. So you can go back to the right-hand menu to answer this, but what's your current level of integration of generative AI into your future products or services?
And just so for anybody who couldn't find it last time, on the right-hand navigation, maybe the third one down, there should be a little button that says polls, which will help you get there.
Thanks, Bart. We'll give everybody a few seconds to answer that.
While we're waiting for that, Tori, I just wanted to make one comment based on what you said. I think over the last couple of years, I've talked to a lot of customers about automation and AI, and they always felt like it was reserved for the Fortune 100s of the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like those are things that Bank of America and Wells Fargo can do, not something that I can do. And the reality is, in the last 3 years, the landscape has really changed, and there are amazing automation and AI and document management, document processing tools out there that every single organization can afford.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I'm at the helm of a very small organization. I mean, AIM's fairly big in association world, but not when you compare it to private sector. And we still have an AI first mentality right now, where if we have a new problem that arises, let's at least do the research and see if we can answer this with AI. So I think we got results in. So the 46% said that we don't have a plan yet, 23% unsure how to integrate AI into our plans. We have 7%, wow, with a dedicated team and budget. That's great. And we're looking to, 23% say we're looking to establish a team and budget for next year. So that's awesome. That's great. And I think, I don't know the exact demographics of all of our attendees today, but I will say, about 5 months ago, I did a webinar for mainly federal employees. And when I asked a similar question to this, it was almost only, I think it was about only 5% even had plans to figure out how to integrate AI. So I think even in the last 6 months or so, we're seeing organizations at least develop plans and start thinking very formally about what AI might look like in their enterprise. That's really interesting. So speaking of AI, let's talk about not just what the data is showing us from this past year, but what is that future going to look like? And beyond 2023, if I'm reading the tea leaves, I think we're going to continue to see intuitive AI further advance information management. Our advocacy work and our conversations with members have indicated that there's going to be greater access to information without the need for laborious, time-consuming processes like applying taxonomy or managing taxonomy. We're also seeing definitions and roles continue to shift within information management, just like in other fields. We are seeing a really strong need for all of us, AI developers, regulators, and users, to embrace a shared responsibility for AI. So if organizations use AI, you share the risk of using it, and you share the responsibility for making sure that it protects user data, that it produces accurate, responsible results, et cetera. And then finally, we 100% are seeing from organizations a demand for accurate and transparent AI. And that's simply just going to become a must-have to help reduce the risk and liabilities that organizations are worried about, right? That's what makes AI realistic at an enterprise level. You have a way to control the risk and liability for an organization. And that might come through with watermarks for AI output. That might come through with private ChatGPT implementations, but that is going to be a must-have requirement. And we're hearing that over and over and over again. So those are all the trends. I think it's now time for me to put on my CIO hat again, which I'm really excited about. Jason Burian is going to show us how Knowledge Lake is making future trends about reality today.
Thanks. Thanks, Tori. I think you said it earlier. Every board and every CEO and across the world is asking their teams, how are we using AI? Which is what a lot of boards do, is they ask big, broad questions that have huge, giant implications about how we're using AI. And it's not just well, we're going to go build this over here and use this. It's there are vendors that are integrating AI into their solutions like Salesforce and HubSpot rapidly. But I think my advice when I hear that question is start with something practical. I think that a lot of AI projects can be very, very ambitious, right? They can be sort of these giant moonshot ideas. And they don't have to be. They can be something that's sort of real world and tangible. It can deliver actual benefits to an organization quickly and easily. And I think one of the best places to start with that is in document processing. So what we call IDP, or intelligent document processing, which is in its simplest form, the ability to transform unstructured data into structured data. So as an organization, every organization on the planet has unstructured data in the form of documents. And in fact, it's almost overwhelmingly in favor of that's the type of information that your organization gets. Every company on the planet is being inundated with documents being sent to them, emailed to them, mailed to them, still in paper. I know it's 2023 and we're still dealing with paper, but it's the truth. And so what IDP can do is transform that unstructured document into structured information. And so why is that important? Well, first and foremost, as we talk about automation, you have to be able to unlock this data. You have to be able to identify what the documents are, what department they belong to, what customer they belong to, how much they're for, are they signed or not, to be able to drive workflow and automation, right? You have to be able to understand sort of what it is before you can route it where it goes. And in the past, we would use humans to do that. They'd pick up the piece of paper and go, oh, that goes to Tori's desk, and they would walk it over there. But IDP has the ability to using AI to really unlock vast amounts of information from these documents. Second is document management. A lot of these documents are corporate records. They have to be kept. They have laws and regulations, compliance, audits that are related to being able to provide these documents. And without access to this information, you really end up with a giant, messy file share that somebody has to comb through. And you really don't have an organized way of being able to get at the content that you're looking for. And then finally, and I think one of the most overlooked aspects of AI when it comes to IDP is around data analysis. Many people look at their documents and the way that they store them as a digital filing cabinet, and that is important. Like I said, these are corporate assets and corporate records, and they have to be kept and organized. But if we really think about what that content represents, these documents, once you've unlocked the data out of them, are maybe the most powerful data lake that your organization can use for insights into your business. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. We've had the ability to get information out of documents for a long time. The capture and IDP space has been around for at least the last 20 years, if not longer. But the industry has really been reshaped by intuitive AI and by large language models in a couple of really interesting ways. First, what Tori sort of alluded to earlier, which is the democratization of tech. These systems used to be very IT heavy and had to be stood up over the course of months. They required engineers and developers to write code and regular expressions to be able to unlock this data. But what intuitive AI has given us is the ability to have day zero document understanding with no training whatsoever. And we've really dramatically reduced that upfront burden of setting these systems up to almost zero. Second, they've been able to unlock an immense amount of information that previous methods have made very, very, very complicated. And so being able to ask a document using a large language model, is this document signed? Does this contract have an auto renewal clause? We're hearing, with the growth of software as a service and annual contracts that automatically renew unless you tell them 30 days in advance that you don't want to renew it. Vendors are putting in these auto renewal clauses, and being able to understand just that simple element to be able to put in place workflows around your renewals can save you tons of money on systems that you didn't want to renew, but didn't know you needed to make that communication. Does this document contain a credit card number, or does it contain PII or PHI? These are important pieces of data that were hard to get to before, but had dramatic impacts on how those documents were stored, what access controls we gave to users that have that information, what workflows or processes they went through, who in our organization got to put our eyeballs on them. And so why is IDP a great place to start? If we look at some of these use cases that Tori alluded to earlier, they all kind of have one thing in common, and that is they originate from outside of our organization. Processes that originate inside of organizations, things we create ourselves, we typically build pretty effective systems using forms and data and workflow, and we don't usually go, oh, we'll create a document that somebody will fill out to do that, at least not anymore. But for these processes that originate outside of your organization, simple things like a vendor sending you a quote or a contract or an invoice, a customer sending you information. If you're an insurance company, getting a claim. If you're a financial services company like a bank or a credit union, things like loans or new accounts. Hiring processes involve people that are coming into organization from outside. So you have things like driver's license and I-9 forms. All of this content originates outside of your organization. It comes to you in sort of whatever format they want to send and whatever layout they want to send, containing whatever data they want to send. And so because you don't really have control over it, it has the ability to dramatically affect how your organization reacts to it and handles it, how we automate it, how we build workflows around it. Okay, and so I'm going to share my screen. And that should be shared now. Great. And so I'll show you some of the ways in which AI-powered IDP can really unlock this data, which can transform downstream processes. So this is knowledge lake. Now documents come into us from anywhere, from various sources, paper, electronic, email, et cetera, et cetera. And they go through a process, and using our day zero document understanding, completely untrained, knowledge lake can do a really great job of unlocking that data by simply just telling it what you want. And so here I have a couple of different use cases that I think demonstrate the broad applicability of AI across an organization. So here we have a very common use case, which is invoices. Everybody on the planet, if you're sitting here watching this, you probably work at a company. You're probably not doing this for personal reasons, although Tori and I are pretty entertaining, so maybe you are. But if you work at an organization, you get bills. You buy things, and they send you bills, and you have to pay them. And so being able to extract all of this information without having to train the system at all is a major evolution in AI. I think one of the interesting things that AI has the ability to do is these line items, these lines that describe what we bought. They come in every flavor and every shape that every vendor in the world wants to send us. And it seems nobody has decided to standardize on anything. But because we're not extracting data purely just from like, go and find this table, we're asking the document a question in the same way a human would. We're asking it the question, give me the line items for this document in a table that is organized by quantity, description, item amount, and total. Large language models, generative AI, can normalize those tables no matter what format they come in. Okay, let's move on to the next one here. So driver's licenses, broadly applicable to a lot of use cases, and hiring, in know your customer or know your third party use cases at banks and credit unions, wealth management companies across the world. And this is an interesting use case because we have lots of different driver's license, passports, identification cards in lots of different formats. So being able to train a system to do this is kind of complicated. It's at least rigorous. It requires a lot of work. But because large language models don't require training, these sort of just work out of the box. All right, let's see if we can get to some interesting ones. Here's an interesting use case in the realm of human resources and hiring, which Tori showed earlier was one of the use cases that was relatively low on automation across organizations pulled. And the reason this is complicated is because you can see here, Nick has sent us a resume. Resumes can come in any format. This is what we refer to as unstructured documents, meaning they're just text on paper that somebody typed inside of a Word document. They don't follow a format or a layout or fixed. And because of that, they can be really complicated to get information out of. But because of large language models, they're now relatively easy. Here's a really interesting use case that we're seeing a huge growth in the last couple of years, and that is student onboarding, the processing of student transcripts for higher education, universities and higher ed organizations across the country. And so, okay, pretty easy: school name, date issued, student name. Okay, no problem. But being able to get credit earned and unweighted GPA. So what we're actually doing here is we're asking AI to go find all of that information on the page and calculate the total number of credits earned and unweighted GPA from all of those classes so that a human doesn't have to do it. This is information that otherwise would have been very, very manual for a person to have to review every single one of these to be able to get this information. And then finally, loans, mortgages, auto loans, commercial loans, personal loans. It seems like lending is sort of a natural part of our culture now. And these documents can be incredibly difficult to get information off of. But because of their varied layouts. One of the things I find interesting here is this is an occupancy statement document. And we're asking, what is the occupancy status? And even though it's not, there's not just one box where that's answered. This is actually a check, sort of multiple choice option here. And the large language model is still able to identify that this box is checked, and that's the answer to that question. So I'll pause there and see if anybody has any questions before we go on.
Okay. I have a quick question.
Okay, Tori, you're our guest. You can go first.
Well, here's me putting on the CIO hat. So I find it fascinating and really compelling that with a large language model, as you said, you don't have to do as much training up front. You don't have to teach the model, this is a status, this is a name, sorry for the dog. So I guess my question is that time and effort being spent elsewhere? Like, is the time and effort now instead being spent on maintaining the model or training the large language model at perhaps a higher level as opposed to training it on discrete fields, taxonomies, or is it just you've saved that time and labor?
I think you've definitely saved that time and labor. I think you've also saved the level of resources necessary to get a system like this off the ground. It used to be a very, very IT heavy project that required developers and engineers to write code. And even not long ago of you talked about narrow AI, being able to train a machine learning model or a neural network on a very specific discrete data set could at some point require a data scientist. Now you're just simply telling these platforms the types of information. You're almost giving it hints, right, in using natural language, rather than having to program, which again is back to the democratization, the low code, no code way these platforms work. And so I think you're seeing time to value. These projects used to take 3, 4, 6, 8 months. And now you're seeing 3, 4, 6, 8 days to be able to get an implementation from zero to something working incredibly quickly.
And Philippe actually asked a question that I wanted to ask too about success rate and how long did it take you to get at this rate? And so I kind of want to know, without output, do I get a confidence rating that tells me this is how confident we are that this is accurate? Like, and in most cases, I'd want at least 98% accuracy, depending on the sensitivity of the process and document.
Yeah, you'd want to hit some threshold so that, if confidence rating is greater than X, you can you assume the risk and it can be straight through processing. And that's really where you get the economies of automation. And so, yes, many platforms in the world, including Knowledge Lake, give you these confidence levels because it allows you to sort of know, okay, does a human need to look at this, right? Or can I send it straight through? I think what we've seen out of the box so there's sort of 3 different levels to generative AI. The first one is zero shot, or what we refer to as day zero accuracy. And that is being able to ask the generative AI or intuitive AI for information, and it knows the answer. We've seen that be 60, 70, 75, 80% accurate completely out of the box. Then the next step is in the world of generative AI, what they're referred to as few shot training, where you hand it a document or you hand it a question and you say, I'm going to ask you to get the information off of this document. And here's what the right answer looks like. If I were a human doing this, this is what the right answer looks like. And it's a way for the large language model to learn what right and wrong is like. And that's very, very simple, right? It usually requires 1, 2, 3 examples to sort of train. It's why they call it few shot training. And we've seen that make that leap from 70, 80 up to 90. And then finally, the last one is what they refer to as fine tuning. And this is really saying, I have a very specific bespoke data set, and I want to fine tune this model on this. I want you to use this data set over your sort of data set that's come from the internet and Reddit and other places. And that doesn't have to be difficult, but that's how you can really get from 90 to 99 if that's part of your requirements. And I think what we've seen is, again, it used to be really difficult to get to 50%, and getting from 50 to 80 was almost impossible. Now we're starting at 70, and getting to 80 or 90 is relatively simple. And then getting all the way to 99 is now actually a possible reality.
So along those lines, though, I've seen a lot of reports about the public version of ChatGPT is basically getting worse. It's getting dumber, partially because the trainers, the general public, are contributing garbage. Like social media is a cesspool, and it's being contributed to public ChatGPT. So how do you control that at an enterprise level for these folks that are doing the few shot training or the fine tuning training? Do you need to put some boundaries around that to ensure that the system is getting high quality training?
So certainly I think GPTs, if they give you the wrong answer, it's humans' fault, right? Like we did this to ourselves. And it's evolving quickly. We're only about 12 months in. 12 months ago, GPT-3 came out. And I think one of the reasons it's getting better, obviously source material, or worse is obviously source material. But the other thing that's changing is the context window. We're allowing it to take more inputs when I ask it a question. And obviously, the more parameters you throw into a thing, the more variability you get. I think it's really important to have standards and practices to be able to monitor your straight through processing and your confidence levels and your accuracy. It's good to have access to that data so that you can notice trends of whether it's going up or down. I think if I have to really answer the question, I think we're seeing changes between 3 to 3.5 to 3.5 turbo to 4 to 4 turbo. We're seeing changes there. But like with ChatGPT 3.5 turbo, that's mostly unchanged from day or month to day. It's pretty consistent when you're in a version.
So maybe that becomes one of the, when you're doing system selection, looking for something that has regular version updates, service packs, however you want to like apply it. Yeah. So this is probably a good segue to Pascal's question about, he said there's great cybersecurity and confidentiality risk in certain industries, in his case, the finance industry. That being said, would you guide a financial institution or other similarly sensitive enterprise to buy consulting services or use open source AI solutions? And is it still safer to build in-house?
Okay, so that's a nuanced question. So absolutely, security and data privacy need to be at, Tori, like you alluded to this earlier, need to be at the forefront when you engage in these projects. And that's not just with IDP, but anything. But, we're talking about sending, PII, PHI, sensitive customer data. We've all heard the story of the engineer who uploaded the entire Samsung Android source code. And now it's, so you need to ask a couple of questions. What is the model that's being used? So if you're going to work with a vendor, what is the model being used? What are their data privacy agreements? Are inputs being used to reinforce the model? Are prompts being used to reinforce the model? And are results being used to reinforce the model? And I will tell you, there are vendors out there like Knowledge Lake where the answer to that is no. None of the data that we send to an AI model ever becomes permanent part of that model. It's used, we get the answer, and it's all discarded. So there are vendors out there that can answer that question and give you a high level of confidence that your data is safe with AI. And if they don't, I would strongly consider you dig deeper or move on, because it's serious stuff.
Which means also too that if you build in-house, you still might be using a model inadvertently that is using your data to reinforce a public model, right? Like you do have to make sure there's some segmentation there. And I know Microsoft and other folks have been pretty deliberate in clarifying that and what happens to the data.
Yeah, if you're using OpenAI's ChatGPT, things that you send it become part of that model. If you're using Microsoft's implementation of OpenAI, in a lot of cases, they don't. If you're using something like Llama from Facebook, you're taking that local. And so it's not connected back, but now you own 100% of the responsibility for that thing. So there are trade-offs. I think like the great cloud migration, every organization realized we're not data center companies. We don't have any business running a big giant data center. There are a few people in the world who should probably do that. And I think the same with large language models. I think my guidance, and this is not a universal statement, my guidance is trust and rely on brands like Microsoft versus trying to do it yourself. But again, it's not 100% for every use case.
Now, at a micro level, and Kevin asked a question about this, which I think is timely. At a micro level, if you're building your own instance of an AI engine, ChatGPT or otherwise, his question is, are we finding that organizations are consolidating their data into that system of record or data lake that's created by intuitive AI, or are they wanting to keep content separate, which is kind of interesting because if you're allowing an AI engine to crawl over all of your content, is it ignoring the permissions that you've put in place to say, for instance, I don't want you to crawl my HR data, or I don't want you to crawl my minutes from my board meetings. How do you create that segmentation? And can you?
Yeah, one of the problems with those silos is not only have you created all of these different locations where this content and this information lives, but you've also created security models that are different across all of them. Period, full stop, right? There's no universal truth to access control and your sort of level of permissions. And so since you've siloed all these data, you now have to sort of recreate that in the ether, because to take advantage of AI, you've got to collect the data. And that also means collecting the access controls, because, you know, if I don't have access to the document that contains my CEO's salary, but I ask the AI question, what is my CEO's salary? Without proper access controls, you might get that answer. And so that's one of the complications of, we've moved to these siloed systems because we think, oh, well, this point solution is better at solving this one problem than a platform approach. And that may be true. There are advantages and disadvantages of both. But to really leverage AI to its fullest, we have to have access to the data. And because it's in so many different various places right now, that's incredibly challenging. Not from a data collection perspective, but because of a data access perspective.
And it might go towards also like the readiness of it. Is your organization ready for AI? That's probably something you want to check off, right? Like, what are the access and permission controls? I would also want to know from you, and this was another question from Kevin, about, is the AI engine capable of assessing the quality of the data that's going in? So say like you have multiple versions on SharePoint of the same document because your staff doesn't understand versioning control. True story. Or in Kevin's case, he's asking how important is OCR quality? So just across the board, how important is the quality of the data that's going into your enterprise AI engine?
Yeah. So as a general rule, most AI large language models don't, when you're talking about documents, they require that OCR layer be created somewhere else. But however, there are I think that we have seen huge leaps in the quality of OCR because of AI, because of work that companies like Amazon and Microsoft have been doing with OCR technology, specifically around handwriting. So if you're out in the audience and you've had a problem before and you couldn't solve it because it had a lot of handwriting content, revisit that problem now, because it's dramatically changed in the last couple of years. But yeah, the data input being accurate, being clean, being of high quality will ultimately affect the output. An interesting complication when it comes to large language models, generative AI, is if you ask the AI how confident they are that they got the right answer, their answer will be yes, because otherwise they wouldn't have given it to you. So you still have to rely on the quality of the data, meaning sort of OCR accuracy, to understand whether you can trust the answer or not.
Yeah, I almost imagine it, you know, in project management, they always talk about time, money, or scope, like something you can add more to the scope, but it's going to increase the money. I wonder if there's almost like a triangle for AI that's around like access, quality, and security or something, right? Like if there's more data and it's poor quality, I would imagine you'd have to spend more time training, right?
Training or reinforcing, right? Like fine tuning, building a personal GPT, you know, that kind of stuff.
All right. I always learned a lot myself on these webinars. I want to thank everyone for attending, as well as the deep and thoughtful questions. You can reach out anytime thereafter with additional questions. We love to talk about this stuff. Knowledge Lake has over 250 customers, including some in the financial industry, Traditional Capital Bank, Bank of America. And we love doing one-off demonstrations. And while they can get a bit costly, we do budget for proof of concepts, and that is using your data, your documents, if you so choose. We typically have about 5 spots for proof of concepts. So you could sign up 5 spots per webinar, but you can sign up by reaching out to Pam directly, or follow up with us via the chat. Once again, we truly appreciate your time and participation. and look forward to meeting again. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone.